Throughout my time in middle school, I went on a lot of different field trips. My school kind of believed in the idea that field trips hold a lot of educational value, and that's something I would definitely agree with. We went to a lot of different places, but no matter what, at least once a year, our class would go to the zoo. I was in the 7th grade. It was near the end of the school year, and this is the day our school scheduled to take that trip. Now, we don't live near a big city, so we weren't able to go to some big city zoo. Rather, we went to this smaller but still decently sized zoo surrounded by forests. It was actually really well known where we lived, so despite its location, it saw a decent amount of business. Nowadays, however, I think the place went out of business, but I could be wrong. Our class had about 40 people, and we would all travel in one group and take a predetermined route. But what sucked is, because we had such a big group, we didn't move quick enough to be able to see the whole zoo. To get around this, my friend Carson and I would sneak away from the group and create our own route just for the two of us. Heads were counted at the start of the trip, at lunch, and at the end of the trip, so as long as we made sure to be with the group at those times, we knew no one would notice. Not even 10 minutes after our group set off and we split away, we explored different parts of the zoo, all the way up until lunch. When lunch came, we entered back into the group like nothing had ever happened. It was so smooth, in fact, that we planned to do the exact same thing after lunch. Even with our pace, there were a few enclosures we didn't get to see yet. One I really wanted to see was the bat enclosure. It was probably the enclosure the zoo is most known for. They had this whole cave entrance set up, man-made of course, and inside were the bats themselves. But it was cool, because they had to reverse simulate night and day with the lights, so that way the bats would be awake when the zoo had visitors. This meant that during the day, besides a few dim black lights to let visitors see, it was completely dark. So, once lunch ended, we once again split from the group, and this time headed to the bat enclosure. Like how I just described, it was dark. I could tell there were a few other people in there, but not too many. I was physically pointing something out to Carson when I felt someone grab my arm with a good amount of force. I looked over, and it was some guy in one of the zoo employee uniforms. He told me we weren't allowed to touch the glass, something I wasn't even doing, and said the two of us would have to follow him. We were of course a bit startled. We didn't want to get in trouble with the zoo, because we knew that meant we would in turn get in trouble with our school. So, we followed him. He led us through a few dark passageways, until finally I could see the neon glow from an exit sign. He was taking us outside. He then opened the door, and all the light from outside seeped in. We continued to follow him. We went outside, and the door closed behind us. That's when we realized that all that was out there was the forest and an old car parked against the building with nothing but its trunk open. We had no idea what we were doing out there. The guy then turned around and told us to get in. There was no need for him to specify. There was nothing else for us to get into other than the trunk of his vehicle. That's when we were starting to realize something was definitely wrong. We frantically turned around and tried the door, but it had locked itself when it closed. When we turned back around, we noticed the guy now had a knife and was pointing it in our direction. He started shifting it towards the trunk in such a way like he was telling us to hurry. Carson and I looked at each other, and then back at the guy. I yelled out one word, "Run," and we did. We were able to just barely get past the guy. We then ran directly into the forest, where we knew he'd have a tough time chasing us. I don't know how long we ran, but it was long enough to lose the guy. I knew that if we turned right, we would eventually hit a fence to the zoo. So we did, and sure enough, we hit a fence. The two of us jumped it unnoticed, and we were now both back in the zoo. A few minutes later, we found our class and regrouped with them, completely out of breath. Once again, we went unnoticed. Carson and I agreed to keep quiet about the whole thing. It sounds selfish, but at the time, we knew that if the school found out about what we went through, they would massively cut down on the amount of field trips offered. So, we went the rest of the day like nothing ever happened. A few days later, I would get a text from Carson. It was a group photo op of the whole class, just taken near the entrance of the zoo just before leaving. There was a text under it. It read, "Look in the top left corner." I frantically reopened the image. There, standing in the background near the top left corner, was the guy that had tried to kidnap us. Like, it wasn't even a question. That was clearly the same guy. His face wasn't even blurry, and he was looking directly at the camera as the picture was taken. This picture absolutely horrified us. I don't think the guy was a real employee. I kinda just assumed he had somehow stolen the uniform. Seeing this picture made me think otherwise. At the end of the day, real employee or not, I just hope this guy never got a chance to try and kidnap any unsuspecting kids. When I was in the 4th grade, my class took a field trip to a rural zoo-type place about an hour away from our school. I remember vividly that it was a cloudy day with the occasional raindrop or two falling. The zoo was kinda small, but it was kid-friendly and had a decent amount of habitats, mostly smaller animals though, nothing exotic. There was also a big building a part of the zoo, where taxidermy animals were out on display, along with other interesting attractions that I don't really remember. Admittedly, I was kind of off in my elementary and middle school years. I would do weird, antisocial things, and my teachers and my mom would pick up on it. For whatever reason, when we were touring the building as a group, I decided to walk into one of the bathrooms without telling any of the teachers. I did my business, washed my hands, and entered back out into the hallway. Nobody was around. I walked down one of the hallways we hadn't crossed yet. I still vividly remember the dim, moody lighting and the scarlet-red carpets of the hallways. My 8-year-old imagination was going wild as I witnessed all the stiff, lifeless animals that were once alive behind the glass boxes. I stopped in my tracks when I saw some man, obviously hiding behind a stack of chairs. I think I laughed, thinking the man was joking around. He came around from the chairs and walked over to me, asking where the group went. I said, "I don't know." He grabbed my hand and told me to follow him. I must have thought he was taking me back to the group. He led me to an exit door which led to the back section of the building by a couple of dumpsters, a few benches, and the woods. When we got outside, his tugging became a lot more aggressive, and his grip became tighter around my arm. He was pulling me into the woods. I didn't even scream or cry for help, but I remember the feeling I had in my stomach, like I was so afraid that I could throw up. And then, a woman screamed at the top of her lungs. It was one of my teachers on the other side of the fence. The man let go of me and ran into the woods. Moments later, a few of the teachers ran outside of the exit door to this side of the fence and pulled me back inside. The teachers all yelled at me, but at the same time comforted and smothered me. They called my parents and the field trip was officially over. The owners of the attraction called the cops. We all got back into the buses and we all went home. As my bus was leaving the parking lot, however, my observant 8-year-old self spotted the man crouching down in the woods near the road, hiding behind a branch, watching the buses pass. Once again, for whatever bizarre reason, I kept quiet. I was probably too shy at the time, or just too shaken up to say anything. All the other kids looked at me weirdly for the rest of the ride home. I didn't care, but I hope that man never found success in snatching an unsuspecting young child like myself at the time. My family and I are immigrants from the former Soviet Union, and money was tight living in Chicago. My parents worked a lot, and over the summer and on weekends, I'd stay with my grandparents. They were very good people. My grandpa taught me chess and walked with me daily. He was my hero. My grandma rarely left the apartment, unless it was to go to the grocery store. She stayed home and cooked and cleaned. On one such occasion of my staying over, I was a little girl at the time, maybe 9, 10. My grandpa decided he and I would walk to the zoo. I love the zoo. I'm an opinionated and headstrong little girl, mind you, and what happened that day changed me for the rest of my life. He and I were walking, and although I don't recall the details as it was like 20 years ago, I do remember that I got mad at my grandpa. I got so mad at him that I ran off ahead and away from him. Stupid, right? My grandpa walked with a cane, and he was a military man in the USSR, so even as an old man, he could take care of himself, yet he was too slow for me. After I ran a bit, I stopped, and I was on a sidewalk, and the neighboring road was busy. The zoo was not too far away. We made the trip dozens of times, so I knew where we were going. I looked down at the street, and a gray 90s Taurus pulls up to the curb. The front passenger man sticks his hand out to me and says, "Hey, little girl, you want some candy?" I look at him and notice there are 3 men in the car. I'm immediately wary as alarm bells are going off in my head that something is wrong. I shake my head no, and the man looks to my left, behind me, and then the car speeds off. My grandpa was running after me, and he was catching up, getting closer by the minute. I realized right then and there that I was almost kidnapped. I stood there frozen on the spot, and my grandpa looked so relieved, standing next to me. I don't remember what he said, but he said something, and then we went to the zoo. Who knows what would have happened if my grandpa wasn't there? I might not be here typing this.